very good. Let me introduce our next presenter, and you will correct me, I hope, if I say your name wrong. I believe it is pronounced Santa. Is that correct?
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Santa Molina Marshall is a self-published author with a book that came out in the middle of the pandemic. I want to know the story behind that too. Her first live book signing was June 10th of this year. And Santa, anything that you would want to further help us understand who you are and what you do, let's have this conversation. I'd like to learn more about you and about your book.
Great. Thank you. Well, I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I also consider myself a holistic psychotherapist, as I have degrees and issues, or shall I say modalities like yoga and meditation. I'm an interfaith minister, body worker, and I like introducing myself with all of that because it speaks to why I consider myself a holistic psychotherapist and how I discovered what holistic psychotherapy is. And that is because I am a consumer of that service, right? So I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse myself. And in my search for wellness, for healing, for understanding, I became very clear that talk therapy was not going to be enough for me. And so my quest for what else can I do to heal myself, but what else can I do to offer others? And that's where the book comes in.
What is
So,
your book called?
yeah, the title of my book is Running Through Darkness, a memoir of a spiritual warrior.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a memoir of my story of survivor as a childhood sexual abuse survivor. And on different levels, I felt it was really important for me to publish such a book. One is to give hope to I mean, 1 in 6 boys get sexually abused before they come of age, 18, whatever, and 1 in 3 women. So it's a rampant issue. And it's an issue that's based and starts off on shame. So I wanted, as a professional who's been in this field for 35 years, I wanted to be able to write my story to say to other professionals, number one, it's okay to be a survivor, and it's important to use yourself in this experience. As therapists, we're discouraged. And again, I've been a therapist for 35 years. Perhaps today there's more encouragement and teaching about the use of self therapeutically. When I graduated social work school, that didn't exist. And so for me, it was important to say to other practitioners out here, it's okay to have a history and a history of sexual violence, and how important and how empowering can it be to share that with others. So again, the book. And then secondly, to give hope to survivors who often, again, are feeling shame, guilt, just want to hide, can't tell their stories to say, and also that feel hopeless. Because healing from trauma of any kind is extremely challenging, but healing from sexual abuse and sexual abuse as a child really throws off your psychological, emotional development, so that it is something that you struggle with for a very long time. But there's hope, there's good life, there's ways of managing the nervous system, which is really what has been impacted through the experience. And so my book does that. It's for the survivors themselves. And what I started to say a moment ago, and then I interrupted myself, is that we find ourselves in the field because we can identify with something. And that's usually true across the board with challenges, life challenges in general. We go into, the drunk driving kind of movement started because there's this woman whose child was killed by a drunk driver. So we identify in some ways, but as mental health clinicians, we're told often to be very careful about how we use that information. Well, my book says I'm a survivor. Here's the gory story, but here's also how I healed. So it speaks to my use as a client, my use of yoga, my use of massage, my use of prayer, my use of Native American traditions, the things that were helpful to me, all in the spirit of giving hope. That's a long answer to just your first question, but yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the process. The thought of I'm going to write a book to actually writing the book. And I'd like to know how the pandemic figures into this too, because that's an added level of difficulty and stress to have to deal with. Walk us through the process. When did the idea first come to you that I need to write about this?
Yes, well, there's different stages of that. I've been writing a book for the last, I'm 61, probably for the last 30 years. Now, how I was writing that book was writing in journals. All my process was journaled. And I thought back then, I'll take all those journals, I transcribe them, and voila, I have a book. And I remember going to my writing coach, Maxine Claire, and she said, well, I had a manuscript for her. And she looked at it and she said, well, you have things in section. This is great. But here's what I get that you're writing from your wounds and not your scars. So that was the first lesson for me. Writing a nonfiction was really making sure, and nonfiction about sexual violence was really making sure that I was clear about, I am writing to give hope. I'm writing to say we can heal. And I don't want to re-traumatize people who are reading my book. So that was the first thing I learned, is that, oops, nope, that's not how you do this. So I had to go back and rewrite the entire manuscript, looking at what is the jewel here? What is it that in the midst of all this trauma, what is it that was helpful? What is it that's going to be helpful to my reader? And so that process began. That process took about 3 years of meeting with this woman once a week, getting writing ideas, going back, checking, redoing. Finally, I'm ready to publish. And then finding the right way to publish. I've never written a book. I've never published a book. I worked with someone for a little while who promised, so a lot of promises, someone who promised that she knew publishing companies, and this was the deal. I was ready to publish maybe 3 months before shutdown with the pandemic. And so what seemed like very hopeful, this is a great book, it's important, we're going to get a big publishing company, turned into everything shut down, Santa. People are not looking at authors. We don't know where the world is going. You may want to consider, this was the suggestion, you can either wait for something to open up for people, for us to be able to do book signing and promotion and get, a big publishing company to recognize you, or you can self-publish. And that's the first decision I needed to make, because I wanted to. I mean, this is a book for Oprah, right? Like we all write our books for the big goal and the big gold. So I was disappointed at the idea that I would self-publish. I also didn't know exactly what that looked like or what that meant. So what I did was I hired a company that serves as an intermediate. All I had to do was send them my manuscript and then the real editing. Oh, I had 3 editors. My coach, who said, I'm not an editor, but I think it's good enough to sell, right? And then I had 2 other people, the hired editor, and then this publishing company, right? So she went through the entire thing with lots of edits, very disappointing, because this is 3 paid professional people editing. I had friends. I've read this book, I don't know how many times, family, everybody was editing for Santa, but at the time to publish, oh my God, there was so much that was never picked up, right? So that process probably took about 6 months with the back and forth, and then decisions to make. I hired an artist to do the front and back cover. I had no clue how to do that myself. So what I want to say is that self-publishing was different. I don't know what I imagined. I've seen a lot of people who self-publish and end up with these little booklets, and it didn't look right to me. It didn't feel like what I wanted it to feel. And I thought, disappointment. But what I found out with this company that I worked with is that they really took care of everything, and they educated me about what it is that I needed to do. I just needed to be available to quickly do the back and forth, right? And decide on colors and decide on the layout of pages. I mean, it was a lot of things that I needed to decide on. And looking through other books to kind of see, do I have numbers on the chapters? Do I have a dash? What do I do? And how do I do this? But they were very, very helpful. Of course, there was a big cost for that. I don't regret it because I don't know how else I would have self-published. Really had no idea how, because I'm also very computer illiterate. So this was all very new to me. So finally, we have a book. And we start talking about promoting it. And that's when we realize bookstores are not doing anything. I can't do a live tour. My first time ever doing a book signing was June 10th of this year. I did some things online. She helped me, she being the person who did the self-publishing for me. She helped me with some getting it here, getting it there, but nothing yielded any real engagement with what is this book and promotion, right? So I'm still there, right? I'm there today. I said to Janina when we talked, do I have anything to offer? Because my sales of books is still very low. I think I have sold maybe 60 books. And again, in June, the book became a year old. And the other thing that I heard a lot from folks was, oh, if you don't sell in the first 3 months, forget it. If you don't promote and get it out there in the first 3 months, you don't have a chance because your book is old. My book is a year old now, right? But I have found that that is not the case. So that gives me hope. I have found that what I need to do is figure out how to promote myself. The book is only an avenue. That's what I've learned. It's an avenue to get me into doors, right? So my task is to let every university that I can know that there's this book and I'm willing to come in and speak about sexual violence and childhood sexual abuse. And there's a book that says, I know something, I'm an expert at this. Not only do I have licenses, but I have a story. So I found out that that's one way to promote. Getting on podcast has been another way to promote. Not creating my own podcast. Is there a question or podcast queen? Dorina or Doreen?
Doreen. Hi.
She
Hi.
has a
Yes,
podcast.
Hi, Santa. Yeah. I will put it in the chat. Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. I've done over 125 episodes, and I just was on another workshop here right before, and it was with Jeff, who's talking about making books out of the podcasts I've done. And there's I have sections, and one is choked by the corporations, people that are leaving, have left corporations. And then there's one where I have interviewed, and I could send you some links of the people I've interviewed that have had trauma that you're talking about. So I'd love to invite you to my podcast. Yes, I'll put it in the link.
Yeah, thank you. That would be wonderful. So there's a match.com, fmmatch.com. I don't know how I got. So what the publishing company did for me, Yellow Studios in Colorado, what they did for me was connect me. Like she said, don't worry, we got you. It'll be on Amazon. It'll be here. It'll be there. And I don't know where it went, but and then she sent me this thing called fmmatch.com. And what it is a network of people who do podcasts all over the world, with who they invite and what topics they like to talk about. So I was able to tap into that and have been on many podcasts. And so they send me links and then I get to post them. I've gotten really active on social media, which I had not done prior to publishing the book, on Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, the most common ones. But what I found is I have to establish myself as an expert in this field. And I am an expert. I've been in the field for 35 years. but how do I let the majority of folks, how do I let the world know, right, that I am an expert in this field, that I've written a book, and that I have something to share. So universities, certainly hitting the streets again with the bookstores, the podcast, agencies, tapping into the nonprofit organizations that are part of what we call the anti-violence movement, and saying, hey, I'm here to do a presentation, a talk, a workshop. So that's what I found. I found that the book itself, it's a great story, and I hope many read it, but really it's an entree to other possibilities. So I wrote a book for the reasons I mentioned before. I also wrote a book because I want extra income. I want to diversify my income. The book itself is not going to diversify my income. I can say, look, I'm real, and maybe I'll get an invitation. So that's what I'm after now. Yes, please.
Go ahead, Doreen.
I was doing a presentation yesterday and actually stepped in to do it again today, but I'm curious, do you do, one of the things I talked about is how I've made money on my book, and it is about a journey to find my voice, and there's reasons why I lost my voice around some traumatic things that have happened in my childhood, but what I've done is workshops. Do you do workshops and programs where people come to you and you help them through?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So right now, and for the last 10 years or so, I've been on, I am a full-time private practice therapist. My organization is Holistic Psychotherapy by Santa. So that's how I make a living. That's what I do.
Great. Okay.
Lots of individuals, some groups.
Yeah.
But when I talk about the book and the public speaking, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is going to organizations that do this work or train their staff, or maybe they have a special event and I'm the keynote speaker. So I get those opportunities, and I get to sell books from the back of the room, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's a big area.
Do you give a taste? I know in my workshop yesterday and today, I gave them a taste of, like, more of an experiential. So are you going to be doing any of that today with us?
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. Yes, absolutely. I think I want to just kind of hear what other questions the audience may have, Brian, questions you have, and then yes, I would love to be able to do just a quick experiential. Yeah, Brian?
The one question that I wanted to ask you, I know that you didn't publish this book, to get rich, but you do have to be profitable to continue to get that message out. What have you found that works in terms of becoming profitable or moving towards profitability as you work to get that message out?
As an author? Or just in general? As an author, well, I've mentioned some of the things, right? Tapping into universities, agencies where this work is being done, general public, right? So I was invited to participate in an event that was not about trauma or sexual violence, but that was about alternative healing. So, so looking at opportunities that I may not think are related to my topic, but where I can talk about it. So I'm Latina, I'm a woman of color, so events. So that's one of the things that I also found out, because I thought at first, oh, who wants to hear about sexual abuse? Who wants to read about this stuff, right? But again, I'm a woman of color, obviously, but I'm just wanting to list, I'm a woman of color. There's lots of opportunities for what's unique for people of color's healing. Well, guess what? I can raise my hand. I am first generation from the Dominican Republic. I have in the book the story of immigrants and how challenging it is, and the dysfunction that get created when people are displaced, both of home, but right. So I can speak to that. So it's expanding on my topic, right? It's expanding on my topic. I just got a request that I denied for someone who wanted me to run a yoga class in Spanish. Well, I no longer teach yoga. I incorporate it in my sessions, right? A client is having a hard time feeling centered. I may ask them to get into a mountain pose and feel strength and connection, right? But I don't do so. I said no, but they wanted, the reason why they were looking for me is because it's a Spanish speaking group. I can teach a yoga class in Spanish. So I had to expand. I don't know if this is what you're asking, Brian, but I needed to look at magazines are another, short articles for magazines, just really looking at where the messages is it's very specific, right? About my story of going from trauma to triumph. That is the primary message, but there's so much in there. Deciding to go to social work school, that piece of the story is there. So I can go speak to a group of newly graduates and say, hey, social work is a great field, and here are all the ways in which, right? So identifying places and topics that may or may not seem connected to what I write about or what I wrote about, where I have knowledge to share. So that's been helpful. What else can I share about that?
I think more than anything, I was just wondering if you had found something that worked better than other ways. If there's one, for instance, if there was one tactic you couldn't do without.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I don't know what's working. I don't know what's working. I've just been told you do it all. You do a little bit of everything, right? And it's really just about getting the word out there, promoting and getting the word out there, however you can, wherever you can. I'm not at the place where I can measure what is actually bringing in and how are things converting, right? I have new clients every day. Is it because of some podcast? Is it, I get a lot of word of mouth. People generally, when I ask, they'll say they heard about me somewhere. They don't remember where, they don't, and that's the nature of my work. People may decide that they want to do the work, capture a little phone number, some data, but it may be months or years before they build enough clarity and courage to actually make that call. So I don't know, Brian, what's working. I keep doing it. What I can tell you that I have found out, though, is that promoting this book feels like another full-time job. And I have a very full-time job, right? So negotiating, like, no, I won't do that because I have to make money and I have clients to see. And one of the other things I did that I'm very excited about, I don't know how successful it'll be, is that I started an online community called Trauma to Triumph, where any client who's worked with me or is working with me or has worked with me in the past gets invited to that forum. And there's a small charge for that. And they get to meet with me twice a month online, live. That seems to be a good giveaway. So I was also told, like, what are you giving away? When you do these podcasts, what are you offering people? What are you giving away? Well, an experiential, as Doreen alluded to, is one of those things. But the Trauma to Triumph community is definitely something that I give away all the time. Come check it out.
Where do you host it?
On Zoom. Is that
But
what you
I
mean? Before I host it?
when they join, where do they
How do
sign
people
up?
join? Yeah, on my website.
A website.
Yep, hpbysanta.net.
So it's different than like a Facebook group
Oh yeah, no, it's not a Facebook group for sure.
where they can interact with each other. No.
No, well, I set it up so because we're meeting on Zoom, right? Folks are, I'm sorry, I was just reading something that came up on the screen.
I saw mine. I see it.
Because we're meeting on Zoom, they get to interact quite a bit with me and with each other. It's a small group at this time. So
Oh yeah, no, I understand that. I do online Zoom groups too, but I was just wondering, I was thinking about Facebook as a group where they can share throughout, just write to share online.
And what I've done, Doreen, is then created a WhatsApp group
Uh-huh.
that I manage. So
Mm.
only the people who are in the Trauma to Triumph group are added to the WhatsApp group. And I actually call it the gratitude list of the triumphants.
Nice.
So the encouragement is to just write about gratitude. I mean, they as they get to know each other, they write about other things and they share things. And but the idea was every day, just one gratitude a day gets posted on that group. So that's how they're interacting outside of the Zoom time.
Nice.
Yeah, and that works well. I am not, again, as I mentioned before, I'm not a social media savvy person, so I've not looked into, oh, I could have done this on Facebook. But so far it's working well. Yeah. So I hoped that's a way to move
Mm.
people around and funnel people. So every time I go to anywhere and I talk about the book, I've printed these little freebies with the email address and the Zoom link where people can participate. Check it out for free if you want to, that kind of thing. And always encourage folks to invite someone also for free. Come and bring a friend. So that seems to be catching on. I hope much more, but that seems to be catching on, and I enjoy it. It's a wonderful way to give back, to
Mhm.
say, yeah, I can give back. So I'm hoping that, and it's a very inexpensive contribution. So I'm hoping that that's a place where people can go. I noticed, I want to read what was in the chat. I don't know if there's anyone as a sexual
I
assault.
was just going to ask if you could see the messages. There's a couple of messages for you in the
Yeah,
chat.
well, I can go back and see what else. But the last one here says, as a sexual assault survivor, I am so pleased to see how you stress the positive. Oh, absolutely. We know that for sexual abuse survivors, there is just so much shame and blame. I already said that before, and lack of clarity about whose fault things are. And we live in a society in a world that really has this rape, sexual assault culture. And so it seems to be very normalized, right? So to be able to say to someone, it really wasn't your fault. And particularly someone who's young, I like using imagine a person that comes to your waist. Was that person responsible for what happened? Um, a lot of talking about, well, what does that part of you need now? What does that child in you need now? And sometimes people get a little nervous when I say that because they think I'm saying they have dissociative disorder. There's parts. No, there's a child in you. It has nothing to do with dissociation or dissociative disorders that went through a lot and moved really quickly. My experience of sexual abuse started when I was 12 and went through 17. So from 12 to 17, I was busy trying to figure out how to survive, how to run away, how to get out of the experience I was in. I wasn't making friends and dating and going to proms. I just wasn't. So that's a whole chunk of time that I just didn't have the focus. That wasn't the priority. Doesn't mean that I don't still yearn to go out and to have fun and to dress up like I'm going to a prom. So guess what? Today, that's my responsibility. And that's what I say to clients. You've inherited a child. Now we can just sit her aside and let her create havoc once in a while, or we can attend to her needs.
I love that phrase. I've never heard it. You've inherited a
Yeah,
child.
you've inherited this child. What do you want to do with it? And also understanding that sometimes it's hard to accept that inheritance because there can be some sense of that child got me in trouble. That child, all the stories, right, that were told about what happened. So for me, it's just really important to focus on the positive, to do a lot of psychoeducation, and to stress how critical it is for us to remember that our body remembers everything. There's a book titled "The Body Keeps the Score" and many others, right? But that the body remembers everything, both the good and the bad, and the indifferent, right? So we talk a lot about transference, we talk a lot about triggers, but it's usually in this negative way, how the triggers affect your livelihood because you have memories, because you have experiences that you thought you resolved that are showing up again and again and again and creating havoc. Well, what about the things that did work out? What about the times when you did feel safe? The body remembers that as well. And can we help people tap into that, the joy, the wellness, even if it was in their imagination, right? So helping folks to identify resources. So when I'm feeling agitated, fearful, or what I call activated, I can calm my own nervous system by bringing in a resource. So I use essential oils, I use crystals, I use art, music, sound, actual literal writing and painting, right? All of that one can use as a way of soothing and calming, right? I talk a lot about it is important for us to know when we're having strong reactions. Is that a reaction that is of today, of this moment? So the mindfulness is really important, or is that something from the past that's influencing how I feel now, or even in the future, that anticipatory anxiety and panic, right? That is the first thing. Identify why the intensity, and then trusting that the body that many think betrayed them during the abuse, that body also needs to be cared for. That body holds those experiences, and that nervous system has been affected. So how do I encourage people to know that what's happening for them in their bodies, it's normal. It's what should be happening. The reaction, right? Of something taps into my sense of threat. And I immediately go into the options of protecting myself by either fighting back, running, or what we know as freeze, right? We do that every day, everywhere. If you're a survivor of sexual violence, we need to be aware that is a question we have to ask ourselves all the time. Is it from today, yesterday, or in the future? And how has it impacted my nervous system? Do I have the tendency to fight? Do I have the tendency to think that that's the only way I can protect myself? And it shows up in our behaviors, right? I am one of those fighters and runners. Definitely. I try fighting. If I feel like I can't win, then I run. I get as far away from you as I can, right? I need to know that because sometimes what's required is not a fight. At the time when I was vulnerable, at a time when I had no other choices, but to be where I was being abused, right? Fight, running away probably was the only thing I could do to be safe. But today I don't have to fight or run away. I have other tools. So helping people develop those tools. Yeah. I think this is a good time. Actually, I'm sorry. I started
Constance,
to
we have
look at
about
the
1
chat.
minute before the room is going to close on us in about 1 minute, and we'll all be pulled into the main room. So if you could wrap it up in that minute, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So what I want to say in 1 minute is that as far as being an author, I really needed to come to terms with what is the story that I want to tell? Why do I want to tell it? Who needs to hear it? And be open to that story. I am the story, right? So be really comfortable and open with sharing that and knowing that the publishing of the book was actually, even though it was horrendous, it was the easiest thing. It's now really living the story and sharing it over and over again and finding who wants to hear it, who's interested, and how are the many ways that I can create space to really share the story in a way that supports people in their healing.